So today, on All Saints' Day, me and my family usually go and visit our deceased loved ones and light some candles by their graves to pay some respect. So me, my father, my sister, her husband, and my niece 4 and nephew 1 went to my long-gone mother's grave. She died 21 years ago, so my niece and nephew never had a chance to meet her. Anyways, when we got to her grave, my niece suddenly looked choked and asked us, while being kind of upset, why she couldn't see her grandma. I was not really sure what she meant, so I just asked what she meant about that. Then she said, "Last time I was here, I could see her. She was above the earth." We all were not really sure what to say, so someone said that maybe she thought of something else, but then she just became upset that we didn't believe her, and she was so sure that she had seen her. This is so weird. The weirdest part is also that she was fully expecting to see her again and couldn't understand why she wasn't there. My niece is a really smart kid. She usually remembers even the smallest things and notices everything, so it made it scarier. I've not really been a believer of life after death, but this really weirded me and my whole very logical thinking family out. About 6 or 7 years ago, a group of friends and I would hang out at a specific home being rented by 2 people in our group, one of whom I was dating, relevance to come. The home itself was a duplex, and the guy who lived at the other side of the home was a friend of the group and he was rarely ever home. On multiple occasions, we would hear various voices throughout the house. Once, while I was showering, I heard the front door open and close. Then, the distinct sounds of footsteps coming through the living room. When I got out of the shower to check, no one was there. There wasn't even a car parked in either driveway. My partner at the time had a full-fledged conversation with what he thought was his roommate, only to discover he'd been talking to thin air. Oddly enough, that incident also occurred while he was in the bathroom getting ready for work. He heard his roommate come home, kick his shoes off, and proceed to ask him a few questions about his day and what he was doing. When he came out of the bathroom to continue the conversation, he opened the door to total darkness. No one was home and the lights in the house were all off. One night, while having drinks with friends, I went inside to pour myself a refill and freshen up. Suddenly, a few members of the group rushed in, panicked, one of them holding his pistol. They proceeded to ask me what was wrong, and that they had heard a man's voice outside followed by my voice saying help. I assured them that no such thing happened, but they were all insistent that it was my voice. There were countless other voices heard, especially those that mimicked the 2 permanent residents of the home and members of our friend group. Boot prints appeared on the wall in one of the bedrooms, proving absolutely impossible to remove. Most people constantly felt watched while in the home. Some people were slapped, others scratched, and eventually, no one would stay more than a few minutes alone inside. Not to mention sleeping there was damn near impossible due to the noises and general dark feeling throughout. A door leading into the kitchen from the carport would fly open, despite being shut and even, on a few occasions, locked. The house to the right of the property had a fenced-in pool, and on more than one occasion, when the kitchen door would fly open, so would the gate to the swimming pool. This house was not occupied. Most of the homes on the street were built in the 1950s and 1960s, so the history is recent and fairly innocuous. Unfortunately, in a horrific turn of events, one of our closest friends eventually shot himself while in his truck in the driveway during a party. None of us know if this was truly intentional or a horrendous accident, but I've not been back to the house since 2014, and I can barely drive without feeling physically sick. I drive for Uber, and I stopped at this house a few hours ago. As I'm waiting, a light turns on upstairs, and this little boy was turning the lights on, waving at me, then turning them off. He did it a few times, and was smiling, and looked like he may be laughing. I waved back and smiled, and even though it was late, I didn't even question it. The girl got in my car a few minutes later. I thought she took so long because the kid was hers, and I commented how cute the kid upstairs was, and her face went pale. She looked at me straight in the eye and told me no one lives upstairs. I laughed because it's Snoopy season, and I thought she was messing with me. I stopped shortly after, looking in the rearview mirror, and saw that she was starting to cry. She took a few deep breaths and asked me what I saw. So, I told her about the little boy turning on the lights. She called her boyfriend, who was still there and was full on freaking out. Turns out her boyfriend had several people mention the kid that plays with the lights and waves. I would have thought it was a joke, but she was shaking and almost had a panic attack about this. Her boyfriend was woken up by the call, and the entire downstairs was dark when I picked her up. I had no other explanation for this because of her reaction. My hair is still standing on end thinking about it. For those worried about the child and suspect foul play, I did place a call to the local police, and they did confirm that there is no child at the residence, although they wouldn't tell me if the upstairs apartment was occupied or vacant. I am driving again tonight, so I will stop by on a break and see if it happens again. If it does, I'll have my camcorder to try and capture anything out of the ordinary. I couldn't hear anything, but he did seem like a little kid that was having fun and being goofy rather than being in any distress. I have been around enough kids to tell the difference, as I used to work in a daycare. Update. So I went back to the house. I sat there for a bit and nothing happened. With the moon being so bright, it was really cloudy yesterday, I could sort of see into the window where I saw him. The lady wasn't kidding, there is nothing up there. No photos or furniture that could be seen. The apartment's on the second floor, but it has those long windows that almost reach the floor. Anyway, there was no movement inside. However, as I started to drive away, I saw a kid in the yard running, but there was no noise to it, no crunching leaves or anything. I had my window open, radio off. I would be able to hear footfalls or, at the very least, the shuffling of leaves. It was just a glimpse, and I waited for something else, but there was nothing. I think it was safe to say that there is something on that property. I have to look into the history of the property. It is a really rough part of the city, and many people die in that area yearly, but I'm still curious what turns up. I work a job that has access to security cameras. I'm not a security guard or anything, but we use them to check on equipment and see other rooms in the hallway. It's a 24/7 operation, but most of the time it's just one person on shift. All in all, I have a decent sized screen displaying about 20 different camera views of various areas tucked off to the side of my desk. Also, all the lights in these various places are set up to be motion activated, meaning the camera views are generally dark and easy to tell everything is fine at a glance. So I was sitting there with my feet kicked up watching Netflix, and I happened to notice one of the camera views is lit up. I don't think much of it at first. Then I catch a moment on the screen out of the corner of my eye. I spin my chair to check it out and see our head IT guy sitting in a chair in our server room. Not a big deal, right? Except it's just after midnight on a Saturday and no one else has opened the door to that room for at least 6 hours because that was when I'd come on my shift. I know for sure no one had gone in there because the door to that room was about 15 feet away from me. I know something is weird, but nothing is really wrong yet. I mean, why is he here? Sure, he can be here and he can just walk in. Maybe I just missed him coming in or something. Who knows? I lean my chair back to look at the door, and there's a light coming from underneath the door, so something is definitely moving in there. I assume I'll just catch him when he comes out to figure out what's what, and go back to my Netflix. A little while later, I notice the light on the camera view is out, but now I'm paying attention and I'm 100% certain that door has not been opened. Now I get the sense something's wrong. Not thinking we have a ghost or whatever, but maybe the IT guy fell asleep in the server room and the light turned off. But why is he sleeping in the server room? I push my chair back and stand up. As I do, I catch a binder off my desk and it crashes to the floor. The server room view lights up again immediately, like someone just jumped in there, and I see our IT guy standing at the desk now, staring at the door. And he's not right. He's standing almost still, but just moving his hands in front of him, almost like he's wringing them, or popping his fingers over and over again, and just staring at the door. I'm still the only one here, and this bullshit is not making me happy, and I have no idea what is going on. So I go to figure out what the hell's going on. I check my knife, hold it at my side, and I'm about to open the server room door and notice the light is gone from underneath it again. These lights are on a timer, and I just saw movement in there on the camera, so there is no way it turned off again so quickly. Well, like most things in my life, I just said fuck it and swing the door open wide and step back so I can see in. Light pours over my shoulder into the room, illuminating nothing unusual. The servers are whining like normal, the fans are spinning, and everything is still. No IT guy, no nothing. I step in cautiously, but I'm not actually supposed to go in there while I'm on shift, so I just take a quick look around while holding the door open for light, and then back out and close the door. As soon as I closed the door, I let out a breath I realized I had been holding and walked back to my area. I was on edge for the rest of the night, but nothing else happened. It was only after I got home later that I remembered something. The motion sensor light had not come on when I'd opened the door like normal, and I know I'd seen them shining earlier that night, which meant that something had manually turned them off at the switch by the door. Was there something in my server room that night? I have no idea. I know it was not the IT guy though. I was about 6, maybe 7 I think. My friend's uncle had passed away and his family had his wake about a week later. The wake was at a funeral home in the Bay Area. I forget which one it was, but I remember everything that happened that day. Now, one thing you should know about me, I hate death. I don't like dead people, cemeteries, funerals, caskets, you name it. The only reason I went to the wake was because I wanted to pay respects and be there for my friend. Anyways, I was already feeling super nervous walking into the funeral home. The scent of embalming fluid and flowers hit me like a right hook in the face as soon as I walked in. A good amount of people showed up. I didn't really know many of my friend's family, so I just stayed by him and his mum. The family decided to have an open casket funeral, so when we walked into the chapel, my friend's uncle was laying peacefully in his casket. The service hadn't really started, so everyone was either chatting, finding a seat, or viewing the body. My friend wanted to see his uncle before the service started, and asked me to come up there with him. I didn't exactly jump at the idea at first and slightly hesitated, but I couldn't say no because I didn't want to be disrespectful. After all, the guy was really nice to me when he was alive, so I reluctantly agreed and walked up, palms sweaty as fuck. The white stainless steel casket was on a stretcher in front of the pulpit where the pastor would be. I slowly walked up and looked at him. Surprisingly, he looked the same as when he was alive. He had on a nice red suit, and the funeral home went as far to give him a haircut. My friend started bawling his ass off. I couldn't blame him. Anyway, the service started, and we took our seats. Halfway through the service, I had to pee really bad, but I didn't know where the bathroom was, and I damn sure wasn't going to wander off at a funeral home looking for it. I could stumble upon a wrong room and walk in on employees preparing a body. But after 10 more minutes of waiting, I finally asked my friend's mum, and she said it was down the hall, to the right, and make a left. I thought about asking her to go with me, but chose not to. So I excused myself and went in the direction she had told me. I wandered slowly down the hall, and to each side of me were viewing rooms in which other bodies were put so families can come visit and view them. Each door was open, displaying an open casket inside. Creeped out was an understatement, because I felt like I was going to piss myself because of fear. I hurried the fuck out of there and turned the corner to where the bathroom was, but accidentally ran into an old woman who must have been with another family. I apologized for running into her, and she gave me a chuckle and said not to worry about it. She seemed friendly, and I didn't really feel that scared anymore, but after finally taking a clear look at this woman, I froze. My heart literally skipped a beat, maybe two. This woman didn't even look alive, even though she was standing right in front of me. Not only was she pale as fuck, she smelt strongly of embalming fluid and flowers. Just like the rest of the place, her smile and makeup was also truly disturbing, like something you'd see in a nightmare. It looked like she'd got prepared, put inside of a casket, came back alive and escaped. She noticed me looking at her and she put her ice cold hands on both of my shoulders and, I shit you not, said, "Shh," chuckled and walked past me down the hall. Creeped the fuck out, I walked away fast as hell, but my curiosity got the best of me. So I walked back to get a look at her again, but she was nowhere to be found. In those 5 seconds I walked away, ain't no way in the world she walked away that fast. She was at least in her mid-80s, and not only that, was limping. She had leg and ankle problems. Now even more creeped out, I went to the bathroom, handled my business. When I walked out, I could hear people talking in the hall. I turned the corner and seen a family about to enter one of the viewing rooms. I made my way through the group of people standing, waiting to enter the room, but I happened to look inside. What I saw will haunt me for as long as I'm on this earth. In the room, laying lifeless in the casket, as clear as day, was the exact same old lady I just saw a few moments ago. I stood there looking at her laying peacefully in her casket, with the exact same smile I saw when she was alive and in front of me. I stood there in awe, wondering if I was hallucinating. I mean, I just saw the lady. The more I stood there looking at her, the more I started to feel sick and lightheaded. One of the family members must have noticed me wobbling and asked if I was okay. I looked at him for about 5 seconds and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in hospital and my friend and my mum were sitting in the chairs by the bed I laid in. Confused, I asked them what happened. They told me that at the funeral home, I passed out, and when I was brought to the hospital, I had a slight seizure. I couldn't believe it. I'd never had a seizure before. Laying there, still in the light-headed state, I lay down and started to think, and everything rushed back into my memory like a mudslide. The old lady, the funeral home, everything. My friend looked at me and could tell something was up, and asked me what was on my mind. That's when I told him and his mum everything from beginning to end, and of course they didn't believe me and brushed it off as if it was a dream when I passed out. But I assured them that it was true. I know what I saw and I'm not crazy. But once again, they brushed it off as a dream I had. I didn't bother trying to convince them what I saw, because only I know what I saw. After an hour passed, the doctor came in, gave me some medication, and then let me leave. My friend's mum took us to Hometown Buffet and then took me home. That night I laid in my bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if what I saw really was real. Did I really have a dream or was hallucinating? Or did I really see the spirit of someone who was about to get buried? I'm 18 now and still think about this every day, and it creeps me out just as much, if not more. I didn't go to the funeral for my friend's uncle, nor did I ever go to another one since. A lot of people don't believe my story, which I expect, and you may not either. And I don't blame you because it does sound like some bullshit. This story isn't made up. Believe me, I'm not the type to make shit up to get attention. Hell, I'm damn near antisocial. But there are things in this world, this universe that exist that we don't believe. I should know, I was one of those people. But that day was enough to change my life, and the way I view life and possibilities forever. If you don't believe me, then don't. Can't get mad at you. But I know one thing. The image of that lady's smile, alive and dead, will forever stay implanted in my mind. Forever. In the late 90s, my sister was born. My family moved into a small 3-bedroom house. I was born a few years later in 2000, and some of the earliest memories that I have are the paranormal experiences that I had in my house. My sister, Mum, and I have all had different paranormal encounters. One of the first encounters that I remember was when my sister and I saw a spirit in my bedroom. We finished playing in our sandbox in the backyard, and she decided to come inside with me so that I could grab something from my room. As we walked down the hallway, we saw what we described as glowing eyes in the doorway to my bedroom. The eyes were a glowing blue colour, and there was also an outline that appeared to be a woman with 2 kids. Another occurrence was in our kitchen, behind a Dutch door that led to our garage. I walked into the kitchen alone, and right behind the door I saw another set of these blue glowing eyes. This time was the outline of an older man, who I described as an angry fisherman. I recently asked my sister, and she also remembered seeing the same man that I did, but at a different time. I also had a toy grill that would turn on by itself in the middle of the night. We removed the batteries to see if that would fix the problem, but the grill would continue to turn on without power. The closet in my sister's room also had a lot of activity. My sister had a toy aeroplane that she kept in her closet, and no matter where it was in the closet, it would always fall over. There were also voices that could be heard coming from the closet. And one time, when my mum had our neighbour over, as she was finishing up a phone call, the voices started to talk again. My mum and our neighbour could both hear the voices, and they described the voices as 2 women playing poker. The same neighbour was also throwing a party one day, and when my mum had to leave to get something from our house, 2 doors down, my neighbour and her friend also came along. Unknown to my mum, my neighbour's friend was a medium, and as soon as she came into the house, she asked if we knew the house was haunted. The friend mentioned that the spirit didn't like the way that my dad would pile the leaves outside the house when he'd finished raking them. It's been over a decade since I had these experiences, and I've never understood what exactly the spirits were. I've recently been trying to do research on what it was I saw, mostly focusing on the glowing eyes, but I can't find anything that describes what I saw. I live with my father, 2 sisters, and brother, and I seem to be the only one caring to notice the things happening in our home. We moved in about 5 years ago, and for the first 3 years, things were pretty quiet. I did, however, start having extremely frequent nightmares about family members or friends dying within the house, but I'd boiled it down to being a result of stress. However, about 2 years ago, while renovating the kitchen in our house, we found an extremely large blood stain under the flooring. We had been told there were a few deaths within the house, but we didn't mind much as none of us were superstitious. However, I questioned myself shortly after we redid those floors when I felt something grab my foot while sitting in the living room, which is connected to the kitchen. I jumped up and felt whatever it was let go, then called myself crazy and moved on. The nightmares worsened around this time, becoming more violent and frequent. A month or 2 later, a similar thing happened. I was playing Beat Saber on my new Oculus in my living room. My brother had been getting a coffee, and we had a quick conversation while he was in the kitchen. Then he left and I went back to my game. I then felt someone bump into me, almost knocking me over. I lifted up my Oculus from my eyes and snapped at my brother, who wasn't there. There were no footsteps that I heard leaving, and he was tucked away in his room already. Continuing with the trend, I felt something grab my foot or hand a few other times, but still just thought I was clumsy and crazy until my friend woke me up around 5 in the morning at a sleepover. She's extremely hard to wake up and jolted up. She then looked at me and glared, and I quickly questioned if I'd woken her with the TV. She said I'd scratched her, in which I obviously hadn't. She had a mark on her leg that looked similar to if someone had scratched her with long acrylic nails. I would know, as my sister accidentally scratched me with hers before. The one which scared me the most was about 2 months ago. I'd gotten off a call with my friend and said I was heading to bed. I jolted up 3 or 4 times thinking something had said my name, but it was in between the hours of 2 and 5 a.m. and no one was up. Not to mention it sounded right next to me. The final time it happened that night, approximately 5:30 a.m., I heard an extremely raspy "wake up," followed by a sharp pain on my foot. I jolted up and checked out my foot. Blood started pouring from the injury that was not on my foot prior to going to bed that night. It was deep, and I had to get up and try to stop the bleeding. I sat there for a second and then texted a friend who was up taking care of her little brother. She told me it was probably nothing, and my dad told me to wash off the injury and that it was probably nothing. Since then, I've been frequently woken up by the same voice saying my name, among other things, in that raspy voice. Keep feeling something grab me, waking up with random injuries ranging from bruising to large bleeding scratches, and nightmares almost every night about my loved ones dying. My friends on Discord calls also constantly asking who I'm with or who is speaking when I've heard nothing and no one else in the room. I have no clue what's going on or what to think about this situation. It's driving me crazy at this point, but I didn't really do paranormal research in my free time, so I wasn't sure if it was some sort of ghost or whatever, or if I'm going crazy.